Hello, welcome back to JC's Writing Advice. I'm JC Bybee, indie author and YouTuber and writing coach. I have 10 books published, and if you are interested in having writing coaching services, I have a video on that on my channel. Also, you can go to my website, jcbybee.com, and learn more there. You can also go to my Patreon, where you can help me support having a chair that doesn't do that. Today's video is more about characters. So I've done a video about good guys and bad guys. I'll probably do another one about that, talking about heroes and villains. But today we're going to talk about that character that sort of sits in the middle. The morally gray character. How, I want to talk about this because a lot of people like morally gray characters, and a lot of writers think they have to put morally gray characters into their books, and some of them don't know how or even know what a morally gray character is. And we're going to talk about that. So, like I say, writing morally gray characters that don't suck. Because it's really easy to write what you think is a morally gray character, and in reality, they're just a badly written character. So, first off, there we go. What is a morally gray character? What does that mean? It's in the description. They walk the line between right and wrong. Their decisions can either be good or either be bad. And especially if they're not the protagonist of your story, you can look at them from the lens of your protagonist and say, this person's terrible, and then they'll make a decision like, what? That doesn't make any sense. I thought they were a terrible person. And it can make for interesting storytelling because it adds a level of complexity to the character, because the reader doesn't necessarily know exactly how the writer or the character is going to react. The protagonist, if they're not the protagonist, doesn't know how. The villain sometimes doesn't even know how. And they can become a character that can serve many aspects of the narrative if they're written correctly. Like some people, like I have at the bottom, some people refer to them as realistic characters. I disagree on that point, but we'll get into that in a minute. First, some examples. Some good, some bad, some funny. Severus Snape is people like to view him as a morally gray character. I disagree. He is a selfishly motivated character that has never grown up past his own insecurities. I don't like Severus Snape as a character. Lots of people fawn over him for whatever reason. And I have my qualms with him. I don't like the way he was written. I think I know what J.K. Rowling was trying to do with him. I just personally don't think she succeeded, in my opinion. But that's my opinion. You can disagree. And I'm sure a lot of you do. Another morally gray character is Boromir. Boromir is interesting. His motivations are clear, unlike a lot of morally gray characters. Boromir wants to do what he views as best for Gondor. And he is loyal to Gondor. But the temptation of the ring is always there to push him toward decisions that are the extremes. And that's part of the idea of the ring, is that it doesn't do good, it does extremes. Another one, this is one of the funny ones, Captain Jack Sparrow. Jack Sparrow in the very first Pirates movie, Curse of the Black Pearl, is gray. He's a gray character. He does things and makes decisions that, from the perspective of Will and Elizabeth, right? Anyway, the two love interests that are having their story, from their perspective, they can never know if they can trust Jack or not. And so that keeps him interesting as a character all the way until the end of the movie. Another character that starts out sort of on this side of the line, goes to the middle of the line, and by the end is on the other side of the line, Walter White. Walter White initially starts out with good intentions, but at the end you learn, and he says outright, that it stopped being about his initial motivations and became about the money. That's what it was. It was all about the money at the end. And last, you have Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys is interesting because when you first meet her, she is a very timid character. She comes across, and it's been a long time since I've read Game of Thrones or any of the books in that series. But I remember distinctly that Daenerys, when I first met her, she came across as the damsel in distress that was being used by her psychotic brother. And by the time, I don't even remember what book it is, by the time has come to power, she has decisions that are both good and terrible at the same time. And a lot of rulers, I think, sort of fall into the morally gray character because they do things for what they view as the best for their kingdom, their empire, their country, whatever. And that can lead to them making decisions that seem, or that we can view from the outside as the reader, as abhorrent, because they're decisions that we hope we never have to make. So it'll be interesting to see how George R. R. Martin finishes her story and her arc in the books. I understand from commentary on the internet that the ending of this TV series was hated, to put it bluntly. So, what morally gray characters aren't? Morally gray characters aren't purely good, and they're not purely evil. Their decisions can be viewed as good and evil, and they will make decisions based off of their motivations. And I'll talk about that in the next section. What they aren't is just misunderstood. They have clear motivations. Jack Sparrow has clear motivations. He says it from the outset. He wants his ship back. That's what he wants. And everything he does is in service to getting the Black Pearl back. And until he's accomplished that, we don't really get much more from him. Boromir, we know, he wants what's best for Gondor. He views the stewards as I don't want to say the rightful rulers, but the ones who have done the best for his people in the generation since the last king. And he aids the Fellowship. He agrees to aid the Fellowship. And yeah, he stumbles. He tries to take the ring. And again, it's been a long time since I've read the books. Most of my recollection is just the movie, sadly. But he clearly makes decisions that make the other characters, especially Frodo, distrust him. And he says things and he acts in such a way that he loses the trust of the hobbits. And eventually gets that back, but that's at the end of his life. And what morally gray characters are, they're not the only interesting characters out there. To be perfectly honest with how often they show up now in writing and in projects that in fiction, they're becoming cliche to the point that I often get bored with the morally gray characters. I often don't like the morally gray characters because more and more they're not well written. Because, again, the example of Severus Snape. I don't think Severus Snape is a morally gray character. Severus Snape is a man who never got out of high school, as it were. He blames everything on his high school bullies and can't get beyond it. And the only reason he does things is because he's motivated by his obsession with Lily. And to say that he is morally gray would mean that he is occasionally nice to Harry beyond just keeping him alive. And he's not. Snape goes out of his way to torment not just Harry, not just the trio, but any student that's not in his house. He's not a morally gray character. People can argue with me all they want. He's just selfish and self-motivated. And morally gray characters can be selfish, but what they do has to be motivated beyond just self-interest, in my opinion. Another character that I think falls into the morally gray category, and on the side more of light than dark, is Harry Dresden from the Dresden Files. Spoiler alert if you haven't read that series up to its most recent incarnation. But Harry views himself as a good person. Sometimes, most of the time. But he has moments where the decisions he makes are very clearly in opposition to him, his moral fiber, but he knows that in order to get the results that is best for his friends, for his city, they're decisions he has to make. And he's willing to make those decisions. He defies the White Council on a number of occasions because he knows that they're not being as open and understanding and not accepting that things aren't going how they think they should go. He is a far more interesting morally gray character, I think, than most people will give him credit for, because his motivations are always clear. He wants to do what's best for his family, his city, and the world. What gets in his way, and Michael, his friend, Knight of the Cross, probably one of the best characters in the series, constantly points out to him, and his other friends constantly point out to him that he views himself as the only person that can make these decisions. And so he relies so much on his power and his abilities, limited as he views them to be sometimes, that he forgets that other people get to make decisions. It's his pride, his arrogance gets in the way so often in the series. And to me, that's what makes him an interesting character. It's not a deliberate choice always to not listen to people. Sometimes he just thinks that it's the best choice, and he can't think beyond himself and let other people make choices for themselves, because he views himself as the ultimate protector. He views himself as the one person that can do everything. Even if he doesn't say that, his motivation or his actions say that he views himself as the one person that knows and can take the right risk, make the right choices. And it comes back to bite him. Like, his decisions come back to bite him several times in the series, tragically in several cases. And he learns. The most recent book is, I don't know if it's controversial or not. I haven't read a lot of reviews about it. I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was a very cathartic read. And my understanding is that it was also cathartic for Jim Butcher to write. So, yeah, Harry Dresden. He is probably one of my favorite main characters out there. That is also morally gray. Especially because in the end, his motivations are always clear. His decisions sometimes seem contrary to those motivations. But it's interesting. I really like the Dresden Files. So now we're going to go over into how do you write morally gray characters. The first thing you have to remember if you're going to write a character like this is they have to have clear and consistent motivations that you as the writer understand, even if the reader or the other characters don't. And that's vitally important because every decision that they make is based off of their motivations. One character I'm going to reference, and some people will probably disagree with me, is the main character. Well, I'm not going to say the main character. One of the main characters of The Wheel of Time, Rand al'Thor. And again, I'm going to say spoiler alert, but the series has been done for years now. And if you're going to read it, you're going to read it. If you're not, you're not. Rand starts out in an interesting place in his life because he learns that he is a reincarnation of the man who was responsible for destroying the world. And that, according to all of the prophecies that he's read and that are available and the versions that they have, he's potentially doomed to do that again. And so all of Rand's motivations are, at the beginning, he's trying to figure out what he's supposed to do. And then sort of in the middle and toward the end, he has accepted that in order to do what he needs to do, he has to die. That he is going to die when it's all said and done. And in the very last, and I call it a trilogy because it is, the very last trilogy of the book, the last arc, the books that Brandon Sanderson had to edit and finish, he comes to terms with the fact that because the Wheel of Time is a cycle of death and rebirth, that there are times where he's been successful, times that he's failed, and that he accepts those mistakes and those successes and becomes I'm trying to, the words aren't working at the moment. I really can't get that. Anyway, he comes to a realization that he has to rely on other people. He can't do it by himself. And that there are parts of the prophecies that don't necessarily relate to him specifically. And he has to hand it over to people that are able to do it so he can focus on his singular task. His arc is very interesting. I really like where it went and how it moved forward throughout the series, even though he's not my favorite character in the series, but I really like how his arc goes and how you can see the progression from farm boy to hero of fate to king to emperor to humble man again at the end. It's an interesting arc. Again, Wheel of Time's not for everybody. I love it. Anyway, so back to characters. You have to balance their actions. That's one of the reasons I don't like Snape as a morally gray character. The vast majority of what you see from him, at least in the first 4 books, is spiteful behavior toward a child or children. Very few of his actions are good. Yes, he saves Harry's life in the Quidditch match. Okay? That doesn't balance out all of the things that he does deliberately to make Harry's life miserable. It people, well, he saved his life. Yes, and how many other people on that in the stands could have saved his life? His good does not outweigh his bad. And for a character to be morally gray, the good and the bad have to be balanced. You have to have both. They also need to make sure that if you want them to be genuinely morally gray, they have to sit as a question in everybody's mind. Are they going to be a net good or a net bad? Are they the good guy? Are they the bad guy? Where do they sit in the grand scheme of things? And as long as you as the writer knows that and knows where you're going with it, you don't have to convey that to the reader. You can leave hints and clues, and I think you should, because it'll really engage your readers. And this is something I'm not good at, so don't go reading my books looking for morally gray characters. This is something I do not do well. And then you have to make sure that their good qualities and their bad qualities balance each other out. Their flaws and their personality traits, they need to remain in that fine line between I hate this guy and okay, maybe this guy's all right. And that it's a very difficult line to walk, because you can easily stray one way or the other. For example, one character that would fall into that category would be Han Solo. In episode 4, we meet the scoundrel smuggler pilot out for himself, because if he doesn't get enough money, Jabba's gonna take him, kill him, do whatever, right? Okay. By the end of the movie, we don't know what decision he's going to make. He takes his money, and for all intents and purposes, takes his money and run. And then he comes back. So the rest of the series, he's still a little bit of a scoundrel, but his motivations have changed. He goes from potentially a morally gray character to not. And it happens that easy. And if that's your intent, like if you want to write a Han Solo-esque character, great. They'll start morally gray and they'll become one way or the other by the end of whatever arc you want to have for them. So these are all ideas and things you can take into consideration, but it is all about balance with morally gray characters. You have to balance out their choices and their decisions based off of their motivations and their core values. I think that about covers it. So I appreciate you stopping by and listening. Again, if you enjoy what you've heard and seen, feel free to give it a like. Please share. Let other people know I'm here. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give it a dislike. And I appreciate you stopping by. Remember, all of my books and my writing coaching services are available at my website, jcbybee.com. And if you feel so inclined, help me buy a not squeaky chair by supporting me on Patreon. And with that, I bid you good day.